Accused of the worst atrocities in Europe since the Nazis, the trial of Ratko Mladic nears its close. But will it bring any closure for Bosnia's Muslims? And how do you tackle one of the world's biggest killers? We'll hear from the man who ran the World Health Organization's cancer program. I'm Martin Stanford. This is Inside. Welcome to Inside. It's 21 years since Europe witnessed one of the worst atrocities on its soil since the Nazis. The man accused of the slaughter of more than 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys was on the run for 14 years. Now, 5 years after his arrest, the trial of the Bosnian Serb General Ratko Mladic is nearing an end. In a moment, we'll discuss what it means for the region and the families of those who were killed. First, here's Insight's Ty Genwright with a reminder of the history of the case.
He's the man who earned the name the Butcher of Bosnia, accused of orchestrating the most heinous crimes committed on European soil since the Third Reich. Ratko Mladic spent the years after the Bosnian War on the run, with a $5 million bounty on his head. Following his capture in 2011, the former Bosnian Serb general was put on trial by the International Criminal Tribunal in The Hague.
Count 1, genocide. Ratko Mladic and others formed the objective to eliminate the Bosnian Muslims in Srebrenica by killing the men and boys and forcibly removing the women, young children and some elderly men.
He was indicted along with former leader Radovan Karadzic, both men accused of leading a genocidal campaign to establish an ethnically pure Greater Serbia. At their behest, more than 8,000 Muslim boys and men were lined up side by side and shot in Srebrenica in 1995. The genocide would become Europe's worst massacre since the Holocaust. All the while, Mladic reassured captive Muslim women in Srebrenica that their loved ones would be safe.
Dobro večer. Kako ste? Ja sam General Mladic.
Good evening. I am General Ratko Mladic. I know they told you a lot about me, but I'm here to tell you you should not worry. You will be escorted and then handed to Muslims.
It was a diversion tactic by the general, who was quoted as saying that borders are always drawn in blood and states marked out with graves. Mladic was also the architect of the bloody 44-month battle in the Bosnian capital Sarajevo, the longest city siege in modern warfare. When it ended in February 1996, 10,000 of the city's residents had died. Radovan Karadzic was found guilty of genocide and crimes against humanity and sentenced to 40 years in jail. As for Mladic, justice has not been swift. He spent 14 years on the run, at first living openly in Belgrade before going into hiding. Many Serbians saw him as a savior, but over the years the number of people willing to offer him protection began to wane, and in May 2011 he was finally arrested in a farmhouse in northern Serbia. Penniless and in such poor health that his arresting officers asked him for an ID card before they realized who he was. Mladic did pay at least one heavy price for his crimes. His only daughter, Anna, unable to cope with the accusations against him, took her own life at the age of 23. She used her father's favorite pistol. At 74, Mladic is now a frail old man, plagued by ill health, a stark contrast to the general charged with bringing the Balkans to her knees in the 1990s. If convicted, he'll likely spend the rest of his life in jail. Ty Genwright, reporting for Insight.
Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Rachel Kerr, a senior lecturer in war studies at King's College in London. Rachel, as we discuss this, the closing stages of the trial is still being played out. What do you think is a likely outcome?
That's
is it possible to judge?
It's possible to make an informed judgment, but it's not possible to say definitely, I think. A number of the trials at the ICTY have ended up with verdicts that you might not have expected. So there's nothing guaranteed about the verdict, but it does seem likely that he will be convicted of at least some of the charges against him.
I mean, putting it simply, are the people that deny the events, and let's focus perhaps on Srebrenica, which is an outstanding event, thousands and thousands of men and boys of fighting age were slaughtered. Is the argument that he didn't do it, he didn't order it, or do they admit he was and he shouldn't be criticised for doing so because it was a justifiable act?
There's different sets of arguments. So the defence case has been that he wasn't responsible for what happened in Srebrenica. So on the one hand, the argument that Srebrenica didn't constitute a genocide in the first place because it didn't meet the legal criteria for genocide. And then the sort of second set of arguments is that he couldn't be held criminally responsible because he didn't directly order it, and the prosecution have refuted both of those. But Srebrenica is immensely important symbolically as part of the trial because of the huge scale of it, and it's the only incidence in the conflict that the ICTY has managed to secure genocide convictions for.
So, what does that do? What does the outcome of this case do you think, into a greater sense of healing in Bosnia? I mean, is the country, if you like, waiting for the outcome of this case, almost to a man and woman, to see how they go into the future? Has life been on hold while this has been fought over?
In some respects, I mean, I think we're talking 20 years on from the end of the conflict, so life hasn't been entirely on hold. But I think the remaining cases at the ICTY have helped to move towards a sense of closure and a sense certainly of some accountability for the crimes that were committed. So Radovan Karadzic was convicted earlier this year and sentenced to 40 years, and then Mladic is the remaining.
Isn't he, or something?
Yes.
So that isn't over
appealing,
yet.
so that's not over yet, no. And the Mladic trial is drawing to an end this week. The verdict won't be issued until probably later next year, to the autumn next year. So there's still quite a long time to wait until the verdict comes through. But it's important. It's sort of important in several respects. So it's important to victims and families in Bosnia. But it's also important in kind of piercing this veil of denial and establishing a record about what happened for the whole of the region.
And about community cohesion, I mean, there was an extraordinary amount of collusion, wasn't there, in his hiding and being on the run for all that length of time, and a lot of people thought he was a good bloke and needed to be protected or hidden or lied about. And they're not going to change their minds just on the outcome of one court case, are they?
No, not necessarily. He still has a sort of good, solid base of support within Serbia, and there's still a lot of people in the Republika Srpska, part of Bosnia, and in Serbia who sort of cling to this denial of any wrongdoing in Bosnia during the conflict. But that's starting to shift, or has been starting to shift. It's fluctuated over the years, I would say. In some respects, because of the pressure that's been put on the Serbian government by the EU, and so cooperation with the tribunal was made a condition of EU membership, which enabled some things to happen. But also there's some research that shows that this sort of veil of denial has been pierced by the cases that have come down from the ICTY and other things that have happened.
I'm intrigued, though, because you study war studies. Is it not the case that by 20 years, 25 years on, a country, even having witnessed a conflict, has moved on, or at least some kind of rapprochement across communities, whatever it is, ethnic divides or affluence and the poor, some kind of reparations are underway. Would it be fair to say that in Bosnia maybe that simply isn't happening because it's all hanging on the outcome of this sense of justice or injustice of what happens to this man?
Yes, in some respects, yes. I think Bosnia remains deeply divided, and in some
Dysfunctionally
ways,
so, do you think?
yes, yeah, to the extent that it still needs international involvement to be able to function, and it's still a very divided country along ethnic lines, and nationalist politicians managed to garner a lot of support still, so all of those things are still happening, and I think this particular trial is hugely significant for the ICTY and its legacy, and it's hugely significant in the region.
That's an international
but it's not that, yes.
It's not domestic.
Yes, once this verdict happens, everything won't suddenly come right in Bosnia. I think there's still a lot of work to be done on reconciliation at a grassroots level.
What needs to be done, do you think? Where's the possibility of reconciliation?
I think it's in dialogue between the ethnic groups. So one way in which these trials might help that is in being able to engage different communities in dialogue about the trials, so not necessarily pushing a message from the ICTY, this is what we found, this is what you have to accept, but actually encouraging a bit more discourse and discussion and sort of honest dialogue about
Because that kind
responsibility.
of what you really must get along imposed from outside never really works in
No.
a country, does it? It has
No.
to be nurtured and created from the country itself.
Yeah, I think it has to come from people there rather than being told this is what we're saying about what happened and this is what you have to accept and now go off and be reconciled. I don't think that can work.
Have you personally reached a conclusion that he's guilty or innocent?
Personally, I would say he's guilty, yes. Yeah, but that's as
And
a
would
historian
deserve
rather than as a judge.
A life sentence. That would be the only just thing to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think he personally bears a great deal of responsibility, equal to Radovan Karadzic, perhaps even greater than Karadzic, for what took place. And I think one thing that's striking about the trial is that it encompasses the range of terrible atrocities that happened in Bosnia and seeks to hold Mladic responsible for all of those. So it's not just about Srebrenica, however completely terrible that was, but it's also about ethnic cleansing in other parts of Bosnia and about the siege of Sarajevo, both of which are hugely important as well.
We shall have to watch that outcome with interest. Rachel Kerr, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Inside. Coming up, we'll talk to the former head of the World Health Organization's cancer program about tackling one of the world's biggest killers.